Good afternoon, I'm DK Roster and this is TTT Live. The Office of the Attorney General is hosting a media briefing to alert on matters of national interest. We are broadcasting live on TTT, Talk City 91.1 FM and on Facebook at TTT Live Online. We go now to Communications Manager for the Office of the Attorney General, Nasir Mohammed.
Good afternoon and thank you for joining us at the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs Media Conference. I am Nasir Mohammed, Communications Manager for the Office of the Attorney General. At this media conference, we'll be providing an opportunity for members of the public to hear directly from the Attorney General regarding matters of public interest. I would like to hand over to the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, the Honourable Faris Al-Rawi.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nasir, for that introduction. Good afternoon to you, distinguished members of the media, ladies and gentlemen of the viewing and listening public. I bring you good afternoon as we call this press conference to order to address a few matters, the first of which is, the primary focus of which is to address the headline of the Express newspaper. The Express newspaper, in its publication of today's date, had the following headline: AG refuses to reveal lawyers' fees, top secret, a story under the name of Ria Tate appearing on page 3. On page 3, the headline again repeats: Attorney General AG refuses to disclose attorneys' fees who do not work for the state. I can't do that, is the caption. The body of the article, on the other hand, is quite different from the headline at the newspaper. And the body of the article starts off with: the Attorney General is adamant that he will not disclose the fees of attorneys who do work for the state. This is particularly so where these attorneys are involved in criminal matters involving Department of Justice, Mutual Assistance Treaty, or the Central Authority, he said yesterday during the Standing Finance Committee. Much of the article is with a reporting of the event as opposed to actual dicta. There is, however, a certain amount of carve-out of what was actually said. It's important, and in a view of transparency, that I address the issues arising out of this headline coming from the editors of the Express newspaper. And permit me, therefore, to address in very simple terms the facts of this matter and what is or what is not the subject of disclosure by the Office of the Attorney General, specifically to the taxpayers of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Let me start off by saying that there can be no lack of transparency with tax-paying dollars. Secondly, let me say that the Office of the Attorney General is subject, like every other ministry is, to examination, to interrogation, and specifically to the exercise of auditing by the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, we were, the Office of the Attorney General, as recently as February and March of this year, the subject of an audit in regular course by the Auditor General's Department. Our management letters, which were sent to us in the close-off of the audit, reveal that there are no circumstances of concern raised by the Auditor General at this point, and certainly in the time that I have had in managing the Office of the Attorney General. Let me start by putting the facts on the record. The first thing is the inquiry in respect of legal fees is one that this government will entirely permit and is obliged to do. It is an important aspect of transparency. What we need to do is to make sure that we do this in a very careful and measured approach as it relates to certain sensitive matters only. The fact is that I have received from the editor of the Express newspaper, Ms. Omati Laida, a request for freedom of information. That request for freedom of information came under the hand of the Attorney at Law acting for the distinguished editor. That was in June 2020. I have also received a request for freedom of information on behalf of one Chan Rampasad, brought by an attorney at law named Samantha Singh Puna. Samantha Singh Puna, by the notice of the Elections and Boundaries Commission, for the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, noted in the Gazette. Samantha Singh Puna is listed as one of the election agents for one Saddam Hosein for the constituency of Barataria, San Juan. So the attorney at law acting in Mr. Saddam Hussein's camp has also written a freedom of request information for discovery and disclosure of legal fees. I can state as a matter of fact that the Office of the Attorney General has been engaged in providing the disclosure requested and has also provided the following information to both of these persons, and that this was also the subject of explanation at the Standing Finance Committee yesterday. The explanation that has been provided so far in the continuing disclosure that is ongoing in relation to requests, which we are obliged to treat with and will treat with full transparency, includes the following. It includes the fact that the Office of the Attorney General has already informed the Parliament on several occasions in statements, at the annual budget statements as well, and also in response to Mr. Rumel Peters, Attorney at Law acting for Ms. Omati Laida, the editor of the Express, and also the Attorney at Law acting for Mr. Chan Rampasad, that Attorney at Law being from Saddam Hussein's election pool and agents. We have informed of the following. We informed, first of all, the aggregate sums of money spent by the Office of the Attorney General. And we did so for two periods, specifically for the period 2010 to 2015, and secondly, for the period 2015 to date. The reason that we took the comparative context is simply because there were continuing briefs to attorneys at law who acted in the period 2010 to 2015. There was a renewal and confirmation of briefs, and very importantly because we were obliged to pay legal fees left over to the account of the government after the September 2015 general election. We have informed that for the period 2010 to 2015, the Office of the Attorney General, which was one office only, spent $444,444,197.16. We have informed that they left an outstanding debt of $141,378,925.54. We have informed that in the period 2015 to the period to 2020 and now to date, that the Office of the Attorney General up to the period March 2021, and this is therefore from September 2015 to March 2021, that the Office of the Attorney General has spent $387,985,199.67. Of that sum, of that $387 million, the sum of $147,931,556.22 was spent on behalf of the Director of Public Prosecutions. So let me repeat that. Of the $387 million odd, the sum of $148 million was spent solely at the request of the Honorable Director of Public Prosecutions. It is material to note at this point that of the balance of monies included in that $387 million odd, we made payments towards the arrears of money of $141 million odd dollars. So therefore, the $387 million spent under the 6 years ending in March 2021 under the Office of the Attorney General, the present office holder, that is me, was $387 million, which is certainly a far cry short of the near $600 million incurred by the predecessor government. I'd like to also inform that those sums of money spent, the $387 million, includes money spent in a various range of affairs and category of matters. Those matters include civil litigation. They include, under this Attorney General, 3 ministries in effect: the Ministry of Legal Affairs, the inherited aspects of the Ministry of Justice, and also the Office of the Attorney General. So to run the 3 aspects of ministry, we have spent nearly 1/3 less, paid the bills of the Director of Public Prosecutions, paid down towards the $141 million in arrears left by the last government, and made payments in respect of matters. Those matters include the following very important aspects covered by the writer, Ms. Tate, but not contained in the headline of today's Express. The matters include matters which are under criminal investigation, matters which are under investigations in aid of criminal investigation, forensic audits, investigations into the surveying and quantity surveying and expert analysis. They also include terrorism matters. They include cross-jurisdictional criminal matters, where the Attorney General, who acts as the central authority of Trinidad and Tobago, carries out investigative work at the request of foreign governments, in this case in particular the Dutch government, the UK government, the United States of America, the government of France, and several other non-Commonwealth jurisdictions as well. These sensitive matters also include a range of fees that have been incurred for and at the request of the Board of Inland Revenue, the EFCL company, the EMBD company, and several other entities that have had resource payments made by the Office of the Attorney General at the direction of the office holders of those respective offices. The matters that are on the table are further providing proof both to Ms. Omati Laida and to Ms. Samantha Singh Puna, the Saddam Hosein representative. Both of those persons were provided with an ongoing list of attorneys at law and entities retained by the Office of the Attorney General. That is only by the Office of the Attorney General. That list also includes a breakdown of a year-by-year expenditure. So a full alphabetical listing of attorneys at law retained by the Attorney General has been provided in respect of the requests made by the 2 parties. Secondly, a breakdown of the year-by-year expenditure has been provided, and I can tell you now the following particulars. For the year 2015 to 2016, some 64 million odd. For the year 2016 to 2017, some 49 odd million. For 2017 to 2018, some 65 odd million. For 2018 to 2019, some 94 million. For 2019 to 2020, some 23 odd million. And for the period October to March 2021, approximately $21 million. The list is continuing. The matters also particularized to Ms. Omati Laida and to Ms. Puna Singh or Ms. Singh Puna also provided that we sought the approval of the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the various governments that we are conducting work in conjunction with at their request, agencies including the Department of Justice and other international bodies, the National Crime Agency, etc. All of these are the subject of reach by the central authority who carries out that work for mutual legal assistance in criminal matters. We have also written to all attorneys at law informing of the request for disclosure of fees, as we are bound to, and we will be exercising the Section 35 right. That is where you balance the public interest against the private information request under the Freedom of Information request. I am able to say that I have received the advice of a team led by Mr. Faris Al-Rawi of Senior Counsel, and that the intention in this exercise is to provide full transparency for all matters of request. I would like to say at this point, notwithstanding having provided a full list of attorneys, a breakdown year by year, a comparison of the sums expended in the period 2010 to 2015 and the period 2015 to 2021, solely because of the connection of the overlap of payments left, I can say that we have not provided certain information, and we will not yet be able to provide certain information in respect of certain sensitive matters. For the benefit of the public and in answer to the misleading headline of the Express newspaper, permit me to say what these sensitive matters are. The sensitive matters that we're speaking about include the following information. We are looking at the matters which are under the exact approach where we are cautioned by law as against premature disclosure. Firstly, in relation to the Proceeds of Crime Act. Secondly, in relation to the Civil Asset Recovery and Unexplained Wealth Act. Thirdly, in respect of certain drug trafficking matters. Next, money laundering matters. Also, serious fraud matters. Certain matters inside and in relation to the prisons of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Serious fraud cases, and certain high-risk matters, also including anti-terrorism matters. Included in this are the recommendations also for investigation coming from certain international players, agencies, and governments. In the caution offered by Senior Counsel in not yet disclosing these matters, the disclosure for these matters intended to be given when the matters are complete, I can tell you the following. Many of these matters are designed such that an assiduous inquirer ought not to understand what is being said. I was asked yesterday in the Parliament by Mr. Saddam Hosein to provide a breakdown of number of local and foreign attorneys paid by the state, sums paid, and matters, details of matters, if these records and notes are correct, for which the attorneys were retained. My answer to Mr. Hosein was that whilst we have provided the information which he is well aware of, because it is his own election agent who was writing for a person who had requested, which I told Mr. Hosein I was confident was he himself who has requested the information, there is an obligation to disclose, and the only things that are not being disclosed are the matters that are sensitive in nature and for which we are required in law to ask for permission, and then after that, when you receive the position, make a determination under the Freedom of Information request, because you ought to lean towards disclosure and transparency. In those matters, some of them I am able to explain now without going into the particulars of these matters, as I will be prohibited to go into those. I am able to say that some of these matters include the following areas. Number one, there is a very large-scale international investigation that is engaging the attention of the central authority, that is the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago, that involves cross-jurisdictional bribery claims right here in Trinidad and Tobago. That matter is at a very advanced state of prosecution in a non-Commonwealth jurisdiction, and I am embargoed, I am prohibited from disclosing the particulars around those investigations, and also from revealing invoices, etc., which will detail the steps taken in court and also the persons who are conducting investigations. Because when an attorney at law engages in an investigation and a particular named auditor or forensic person is involved, that is included in the invoice information. That matter is the matter of concern not only in Trinidad and Tobago, but it is also in several other Caribbean islands, and will involve and has involved the direct participation of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. I'm able to say further, this matter being in the public domain, but not going into the particulars of the matter, there is the matter of the Piarco Airport civil proceedings. That is a matter which started in the year 2004 in the United States of America, and which was put to bed in the period 2010 to 2015, where no work was conducted on the matter. We are in the middle of a civil trial which involves an initial claim of 105 million United States dollars in damages under Florida's Racketeering, Influenced and Corrupt Organization statute, that is the RICO statute, and refined damages now stand to the tune of in excess of 43 million US dollars, that is somewhere close to nearly 300 million TT dollars. That matter is at the cusp of trial and has been set. I should state that the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions has a step to take in that matter, involving a particular step of an indictment to be filed. We have been waiting, and the DPP has assured me we have been waiting and requesting that for approximately 2 years now, and once that step is taken, we'll be able to bring this information into the public domain, including the legal fees spent. There is another matter, the third matter, involving money laundering and serious fraud charges and matters of misbehavior in public office. That matter involves a significant amount of concern in disclosures being requested at present, and which will be provided once the matter is concluded. And that matter we are currently awaiting. It started several years ago. The Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions has yet to take the step to file the indictment in that particular matter, but that matter is a live matter before the courts. By way of further explanation, there is, and I will just use the general caption now, this is in relation to the Clico investigation. For the public record, I wish to put on the record that I have recused myself from the management of the Clico claims, because several years ago, for a few months, I held a directorship at the Clico Investment Bank. I have been, no negative commentary in relation to my tenure has been made, certainly not in the Commission of Inquiry report, as the Honourable Prime Minister has put on the record in the Parliament. But out of an abundance of caution and for the sake of propriety, I have had no involvement in the management of the Clico investigation. But I am able to say that some of the information requested by Saddam Hussein, by Ms. Omati Laida, and which we have specifically said cannot be provided until it is the subject of clearance, includes the Clico matter. I will just remind at this point that the Coleman Commission of Inquiry cost the taxpayers approximately 80 million TT dollars in legal fees. And I am able to say that in the appropriations before the Parliament at present, that we have a request for some $33 million to be paid further in that matter. That has been disclosed in the parliamentary papers and by way of questions asked. And that $33 million stands on top of the sum of $181 million already paid in aggregate in that matter. This is not any disclosure to any one entity. This is in aggregate $181 million so far. So that is 33 million added on to 181 million, with a line of sight of approximately 26 million. In being asked yesterday to provide the names of attorneys at law or the names of entities involved under attorneys' billings, I am therefore explaining why I have not been able to disclose those matters in general areas which are known to the public, because these matters are not yet complete. And the advice that has been given to us from senior counsel is that one needs to be extremely careful about disclosing things prematurely, because you may find that everything will be thrown out at the court for pre-trial publicity or for undue disclosure. I'd like to say that there is another extremely large corruption matter, which is, and I should end by saying that the Clico matter is certainly something that the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions will speak about. The collapse of Clico happened in 2009, as we're all well aware, in January 2009, and we're now in 2021. But just to inform that one of the reasons that I explained yesterday in the time permitted to me at the Special Select Committee was that matters, including some of these matters, I couldn't go into the details because the Speaker had cut off the contributions at that point, quite properly so, but I'm explaining now in respect of matters that are in the public domain why some of these things have not been particularized in the fashion requested of the Office of the Attorney General. I can say there is another extremely large corruption claim, which is the subject of cross-jurisdictional investigation. That matter involves litigation, including civil litigation, in the courts of Trinidad and Tobago, which include the current year. Those matters will be the subject of full disclosure once we are permitted to make those disclosures without prejudicing the prosecution of those claims. Those matters are in the hands of the several players: the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the Director of Public Prosecutions, the National Crime Agency of the United Kingdom, and certain other agencies in outside of Trinidad and Tobago and in other countries. We are minded that the matters also include another matter which is at the office of the DPP. That matter involves a criminal investigation where certain coordinate work has been requested of the Attorney General's office in relation to a serious fraud matter that arose in the period 2010 to 2015. The further steps of investigation are being directed by the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. That investigative work began in 2014. We are now in 2021, and whilst I would love to disclose these particulars, I am not yet in a position to disclose these particulars because I have been cautioned that the premature disclosure will cause a collapse or prejudice or argument in respect of collapse or prejudice to this investigation. There is another matter that is before the Director of Public Prosecutions. It is also a criminal investigation ongoing since 2014, where the Office of the Attorney General has had some coordinate positions inside of there. I would also like to state at this point that the litigation matters that have been carried out by the Office of the Attorney General, apart from including litigation matters that we are requested simply to facilitate by somebody else's appointment, for example, state enterprises or the Public Services Commission or the Director of Personnel or the Board of Inland Revenue. Apart from those matters, the civil litigation matters at the Office of the Attorney General, I want to remind, is the subject of audit by the Auditor General. I have received from my permanent secretary, who is the person that facilitates these payments, etc. I have received the correspondence coming from the Office of the Auditor General in February and in March. I'm able to say on the 15th of February 2021, an interim audit was carried out by the Office of the Auditor General. I'm also able to say on the 5th of March 2021, the Auditor General wrote to the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, giving the final audit for a number of matters at the Office of the Attorney General for the financial year ended September 30th, 2020. And in that final audit, there was no mention. There were inquiries made and answers were given, and no concerns have been flagged by the Auditor General, as has been reported to me by the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of the Attorney General. I am also able to inform that the Auditor General did write us also some other correspondence, again, which was addressed in the month of February. Let me now treat with the positions in summary. So yesterday at the Standing Finance Committee, a request was in summary put to me for a request for the breakdown of number of local and foreign attorneys paid by the state, sums paid, received, and the specifics of the matters for which the attorneys were retained. I specifically informed to Mr. Hosein in particular, and I wish to gently remind the editor of the Express newspaper, whilst we are in the ongoing exercise of disclosure, that we have provided so far aggregate figures year by year, sums broken down in respect of the particular comparative years because we had holdover or payments of fees in arrears. We have written to the authorities and to every single attorney requesting permission to disclose fees. We have been audited by the Auditor General. The matter of transparency into legal fees is a critical matter. The Office of the Attorney General under my stewardship has seen over 6 years the payment of approximately $387 million over 6 years, as compared to the close to $600 million for the 5 years prior to my office being in gear. Of that figure, some $147 million out of the $387 million was paid for the legal fees incurred by the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, and of that figure we have been engaged in the settlement of arrears of approximately $141 million left for us to pay by the Kamla Prasad Bisesa administration. The disclosure of material is something which is mandated to be made in the exercise of transparency. The only issue inside of here is the nature of disclosure, when it is made, the full transparency of it. Certainly in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago there will be disclosure, and very importantly to make sure that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I am extremely pleased to have been audited by the Auditor General, as the Permanent Secretary has informed me, up to the period ending September 2020, and the books and transparency devices available to the Auditor General are certainly in effect. This is going to be emboldened and made even clearer by the process of digital payments and electronic payments, where all payments are reported to the Board of Inland Revenue, to the various tax administration entities in other jurisdictions, and very importantly, where the transparency of value for money can be demonstrated. So I'd like to say, contrary to the headline of the Express newspaper, there has been absolutely no refusal. What was stated yesterday is that there's a process that is ongoing of disclosure. We are taking care to make sure that we don't interrupt certain sensitive criminal and investigative matters which straddle the boundaries between the Office of the DPP, crime prosecution agencies in other countries, and the civil obligations of the Attorney General, which include the anti-terrorism world and the money laundering world. So there's been absolutely no refusal to provide disclosure. Every single year at the appropriation bill stage, I am always of conscious mind to make disclosures on what has been received by the Attorney General. And I'd like to remind that as Attorney General, I am now managing Attorney General, Ministry of Legal Affairs, and the aspects of the Ministry of Justice which our ministry accepted in 2015, as opposed to running one ministry which my predecessor government under Mrs. Prasad Bisesa ran. May I make myself available to your questions, as I'm sure you may have some, and I hope that I can provide some elucidation.
Thank you, Attorney General. We now move on to our question and answer segment. Media representatives, you are kindly asked to state your name and your media house before putting questions to the Attorney General. First up, we have Rishi Harinanan, Rhythms Communications Network.
Hi, thank you, AG. Good afternoon. Rishi Harinanan, Rhythms Communications Network. I just wanted to get some clarification. A few years ago, when you would have been appointed as AG, you would have broken down, like lawyer one got this amount, lawyer two got this amount under the previous administration. Can you say how many attorneys have been used by the office of the AG over the 6 years? And if you can just, not by calling names, but break down how much money they would have gotten over that period of time?
Yeah, I can say with specifics. The attorneys at law across the Office of the Attorney General, including payments for the Director of Public Prosecutions, Board of Inland Revenue, state enterprises, service commissions, for the judiciary, where payments are requested to be made on behalf of representation of magistrates and registrars, etc., and civil attorneys. That precise sum is $387,900,000 odd. So that is the precise sum that has been paid over the period 2015 straight up to March 2021. In respect of the attorneys at law, I have already publicly disclosed every single attorney listed as retained by the Attorney General. There are others, for instance, retained by the DPP, that have yet to be added into that list. Just by name, we did not name those attorneys. However, the sums were disclosed. So there has been no failure to disclose the full sums. We spent by far less money over a longer period of time, and we provided a full listing of attorneys. I want to hearken you back to the presentations in the Parliament where we disclosed that the Kamla Prasad Bisesa administration had spent over $1.4 to $1.6 billion across the government. I was very careful in those Hansard contributions not to name the attorneys at law. I made it by reference to Attorney 1, Attorney 2, Attorney 3. So I certainly did not take that step. Later on in the public domain, where people made certain allegations of certain people, then certain things were clarified. But I have consistently been careful, mainly because I was aware of the criminal investigations that were involved, and I had to be extremely careful not to engage in undue pre-trial publicity. That is not to say that I wouldn't clarify something if asked a direct question coming from somewhere else.
Next, we have Clint Chantak of Newsday.
Right. Afternoon, AG. Clint Chantak here on Newsday. I wanted to ask, well, 3 quick questions, if I could. Firstly, given all that you've said and the disclosures you've provided to certain parties on the matters that you referred to, why do you think that there's such an interest by some of these parties having possession of said information, who want to know the matters, want to get more information on the matters in question? That's the first thing. And if I could divert a little bit, do you have any particular views, given what you've said about the Clico, extra money for the matters with Clico and the DPP? Do you have any opinion about what the opposition leader is asking today for a commission of inquiry with respect to government's mismanagement of COVID, as she alleges? And on that, and continuing on from that trend, is the government making any considerations regarding amending public health regulations to make vaccines mandatory, similar to mask wearing?
Those are 3 very strong questions in different areas. I'll do my best to address it. I certainly couldn't speak for the leader of the opposition, nor would I ever want to. That would be an extremely difficult task, not only because I'm not a member of her party, but the vast majority of what the honorable leader of the opposition says just makes no sense to me. I say that most respectfully. I can say specifically that there is a great amount of interest in people asking of the Attorney General what appears to be innocuous questions, but which can have disastrous consequences. And premature disclosure of the sensitive matters will certainly cause collapse of prosecution, not only in this jurisdiction, but in other jurisdictions. The Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, as you know, has an entirely independent relationship to the Constitution. The DPP has that Section 90 of the Constitution power, and I am meticulously careful not to intrude upon the territory of the Director of Public Prosecutions. The Office of the Attorney General involves ensuring that prosecutions are brought and not sabotaged. The Office of the Attorney General often involves the provision of evidence. As a public officer holding that office, I am also required to underwrite or pay for investigative work leading to prosecutions. Therefore, it is not a mystery that many people who have serious issues to answer in the courts would want to continue to press for premature disclosure under the guise of transparency requests. Let me repeat that. Under the guise of transparency requests. I'd like to remind that the Honorable Prime Minister has repeatedly said that this government will act with transparency. I give the commitment in the discharge of my office that I hold at the pleasure of the Prime Minister that I will obviously ensure that there is full transparency. I am eager to give you the transparency on these matters. I would love for the population to be talking about the sensitive matters that I have just disclosed. Some of them I did so very carefully. I didn't call the names other than the ones that were general or part of parliamentary documents. I would love to give you the disclosures. I would love for the investigation that is now 21 years old in a particular matter to end. I would love for an investigation which is 11 years old or 12 years old to end. I would love for matters that began in 2013 and 2014 to come to an end so that the population can believe that there's no conspiracy theory in hiding matters. That is an important aspect for us to remember. In relation to your second question, which I've touched on in my first answer, which is calling for a commission of inquiry into the COVID expenditure, I think Mrs. Prasad Bisesa is well entitled to ask for that. The transparency that has been given, I think, has already answered that. While she may be entitled to ask for it, the Minister of Finance has laid bare the questions on the Parliament's agenda have been answered, and there has been full disclosure in that regard from the Minister of Health, the Minister of Agriculture, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Social Development. All of these people have asked for information, and that has been given. On the issue of mandatory vaccines, there's an interesting line of case authority which has come out from the European Court of Human Rights. And if you look at that European jurisprudence, there's a very active global conversation on whether there is a public interest that will prevail in ensuring that people who can be vaccinated are vaccinated. The Cabinet has not discussed this matter, nor has advice been formalized in relation to this. All that I would say for now is that people are encouraged to vaccinate so that we can protect the nation as we move ahead.
Great. Next we have Priya Bihari from AZP News.
Yes, good afternoon, Priya Bihari, azpnews.com. AG, over the years, there has always been revelations about how much money attorneys get for state briefs. Some people think that be exorbitant in some cases. Is that a concern for you now? And can you give us an idea about what rates you use to pay attorneys? Thank you.
The Office of the Attorney General has engaged in asking attorneys at law to give discounted rates. Prior, you've actually raised an important issue that I did not address. Some things are just expensive, and therefore we have an obligation to make sure that the value for money is there. Let me give you an example of something that is expensive. COVID litigation has been expensive. I can tell you that since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, that we have been to court on hundreds of matters, largely brought there by attorneys at law for the UNC, frontline politicians serving in the United National Congress have taken the government to court. Let me remind you, free Ian Allen, let bars open, bring back Sasha Singh. I'm putting it in very simple terms so that people can get this. I can tell you, as a matter of fact, I've done a rough back of the envelope calculation, the COVID litigation has so far to date, from last year, March, even before that, to today's date, cost us somewhere close to $14.5 million. And that has been across hundreds of matters. Attorneys at law have been asked to use discounted rates, and wherever there is any form of disagreement in the inherited fees in particular, because remember, I'm still paying for the taxpayers are still paying for matters that are in arrears. And in relation to those matters, we have sometimes asked the attorneys at law to have their bills taxed by the registrar of the Supreme Court so that a settled sum can be viewed to be the final sum. So litigation is not cheap. Litigation has been extremely expensive. And the UNC, I'm using this very, very, very purposefully, the UNC COVID-led litigation, which has been lost, every single matter that has been lost has cost us millions of dollars. All of these matters are laid bare for the Auditor General and will be provided with full transparency as the matters come to conclusion, etc. And we will be, where entitled, looking at the issue of costs. There was a matter that came up at the Privy Council. It is now concluded. It is the case of 2 minors, and in that matter, the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago was taken to court in May 2015, June 2015. Mr. Anand Ramlogan of Senior Counsel took the Kamla Prasad Bisesa government to court for failure to have a child rehabilitation center set up so that minors could be not put into adult prison and be put into the child rehabilitation centers. Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, in May 2015, approved as the head of the cabinet the proclamation of the sections of the Children's Act to allow for that law to come into effect, but did not create the child rehabilitation centers. The government had to go all the way to the Privy Council because they won in the High Court, Ramlogan, lost in the Court of Appeal, and then they went to the Privy Council. And today, the taxpayers have to pay costs and have to pay damages for Anand Ramlogan suing Kamla Prasad Bisesa for not opening a child rehabilitation center. And what I would like to tell you is that in the fees that are due and payable to our foreign attorneys, which are significant sums, and all of which are accountable to the people of Trinidad and Tobago and will be in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, I can tell you that that is definitely something that we have to have a serious amount of concern about.
Thank you very much, Prior. Next we have Ms. Ria Tate of The Express.
Yes, are you hearing me?
Clear.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, we are.
I want to ask the Attorney General how he would respond to the view that the whole issue of legal fees have been somewhat of a, what I say, political football, that various administrations have provided information depending on who the money is being sent or who the money is being paid to. And that from the point of view of the public, whether or not one's expenditure involves taxpayers' money, whoever may be in government, that information should be open and transparent and shouldn't necessarily have to wait until matters work their way through the courts, especially given the length of time our matters in this country meander their way through the court system. So I want to raise that because I know in the past we have all heard figures associated with certain UNC or UNC MPs who were paid legal fees and so on. I mean, it was Peter Rowley that raised the issue of legal fees when he was opposition leader. So do you think that the response may create some cynicism in the public when they hear that you are unable to give the figures because of whatever various reasons that you have just outlined.
Sure, thank you. I think you've hit the nail on the head. Let me make it abundantly clear. I have not refused to give any figures. I have already given the figures. And I have already given a full listing of attorneys at law from the AG's office. There are supplements still to come to that from the DPP's office and other entities, etc. But I have already disclosed people and numbers already. As to your point about the political footballing, I recall vividly sitting in the Senate in 2010 when Anand Ramlogan sought to include Fitzgerald Hines and Faris Al-Rawi amongst several attorneys who he alleged had received somewhere close to $80 million in legal fees from the Patrick Manning government. I challenged Anand Ramlogan then to provide evidence of a single brief, one brief alone, and that I would pay back every cent. To this date, none of that was able to be brought forward because it just simply wasn't true. And if you recall and you check the Hansard, you'll see that several other attorneys at law, I recall Ian Benjamin, I recall several other attorneys writing into the President of the Senate to disclose that that was just simply untrue. In relation to the structure of government transparency, Dr. Rowley has made it abundantly clear that matters will be disclosed. You've raised the crux of this position, the length of time that matters take going through the courts. And as I've said before, and I'll use this opportunity to reinforce now, I would love for the Clico matter to be at an end so that I can provide the information that was asked of me. I've taken a very careful distance away from it, but insofar as there is a number in front of me, that is all that I have spoken about. I would love for the Piarco Airport matter to be finished so that I can account for every black or red cent that has been spent in relation to that matter. I would love for the other criminal investigations begun in 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016 to all be at an end. However, I certainly can't be the poster child for throwing the cases out of court for tripping rules that I am cautioned about coming from international governments, crime agencies that operate in mutual legal assistance, and the Office of the DPP. The Office of the DPP has been at pains to warn, including members of this government, to say as little as possible in relation to matters. So yes, we share your concern that we would like to do these things faster and with full transparency, but I can give you a commitment. There will be full transparency in its full form. Whilst there's ongoing transparency that is being provided, the point is we would love to give you all the scandal and all the bacchanal that comes with allegations on this end, but we have to make sure that we do it properly.
Thank you. Follow-up question with Prior.
Yes, good afternoon again. AG, you said the legal advice you got on whether to disclose the names of the attorneys or the fees was for Mr. Faris Hussein. But do you think that is a prudent choice, seeing that Mr. Faris Hussein also gets state briefs?
So who do you get it from? If everybody is working for the Office of the Attorney General, everybody, people who are in the UNC, people who are in the NAR, people who are in the NJAC, all attorneys, because there have been continuing briefs. I certainly will not pour scorn upon an eminent senior counsel like Mr. Hussein giving advice to the Office of the Attorney General. He is the team leader for that advice. But let me make the principle clear. The principle is to disclose. We just need to make sure that we have the blessing to do it in relation to the sensitive matters and to account for every single cent that the taxpayers have paid. We have already subjected ourselves to the Auditor General, and the intention is that there is no secrecy in legal fees. There can be none.
Next up, we have Rishi, follow-up question.
Hi, good afternoon again, KG. You said that under the last administration, it would have been about 600 million in legal fees, if I got that figure correct. Is it that the Office of the AG is still outstanding does it still have outstanding payments to make from that period? And if so, how much of it?
The amount that was left of the approximate figure of 600 million was the figure of $141 odd million, and we have been consistently paying down that figure over the years. In some cases, we entered into arrangements to settle the debts with the attorneys who were owed that money, and in some cases, we asked attorneys to go and have their bills taxed, and in some instances, we flatly refused, waiting for the lawyers to sue us, and some of them have not, and in other instances, in quite a few instances, they are the subject of investigation by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and specifically certain foreign countries that are very far ahead in investigating some of those matters.
Thank you, Rishi. We'll take our last question from Ms. Ria Tate of Express.
Do you think at this point in time that the taxpayers are getting value for money on the hundreds of millions that have been spent on legal fees? And you raised the Clico matter, which began in, I think it's 2015 or 20. You raised the airport matter, which you said began, I think it's in 2004. There seems to be no resolution in sight. Are we getting value for the money spent on all these corruption investigations and all the fraud and life sport and prison gate and all the various things that millions, hundreds of millions have been expended on? And what do you feel a sense of frustration as Attorney General that money is being spent and we're not seeing the end of the line in this?
I think you've just asked the golden series of questions. You are 100% in your summary of frustration. Yes, I feel deeply frustrated, as does the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago, as does the Office of the Prime Minister. What I can tell you, there is nothing in the Office of the Attorney General under my watch that is languishing. We have done all of our work. The other offices that have accountability to the people of Trinidad and Tobago include a number of offices: the prosecution under the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the Director of Public Prosecutions Office, the Judiciary of Trinidad and Tobago, certain courts in other jurisdictions. When I asked our US lawyers why we were still in the United States courts and that we had the record in that jurisdiction of having the longest outstanding case completed, I was shattered to be told that despite running down the Attorney General's office at under Mrs. Prasad Bisessa's watch, nothing came forward by way of instructions. So I feel bitterly disappointed and would love to see matters end. But what I can assure you is that the value for money coming out of the Office of the Attorney General and other areas, because remember, you're going to have reports coming from other state enterprises that are involved in significant litigation. EMBD is one of them. But the point is, we feel a bitter sense of frustration, but those are matters that are in somebody else's hands. And I can't respectfully ask that more than I have been already. In some instances, we're literally chasing files week after week after week after week, begging for certain steps to just be concluded one way or the other. We dare not ask for an outcome that would be improper, but we are there to lend the coordinated assistance that we must. Is it a matter of X? Is it a matter of Y? Do investigators need to travel today? Do they need to travel tomorrow? Are they the subject of coordinated? There's a very large investigation that is headed out of the Trinidad and Tobago shores on a long outstanding matter. And the job of the Attorney General's office is to make sure that those people had the authorization to attend in that country to take witness evidence, which we're told will result in the conclusion of a particular matter, a long outstanding matter, a very noisy matter as well. So yeah, we feel frustrated. And we are anxious to give the full transparency of this equation and must.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tate. Attorney General, you'd like to wrap?
Well, I would just like to end by saying that I take no, I don't take away any offense to a request for transparency. There must be transparency. There are no sacred cows in this game. There must be a full and frank disclosure. The Prime Minister leads that pack for full and frank disclosure. Wherever we have freedom of information requests, etc., we undertake the balancing act in what we call the Section 35 consideration. We weigh up the options that we must take, the steps that we must take, and then we err on the side of disclosure. The Parliament is also a place for disclosure. The only caution that we have at present is in relation to the sensitive matters, the ongoing matters, where we can literally collapse prosecutions or collapse civil work in aid of criminal prosecution, where there is a serious risk to the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago having the matter botched by a premature form of disclosure. So I take no attack upon the distinguished editors of newspapers and the Fourth Estate for doing their jobs and for holding the government to a degree of accountability that they must in the discharge of the Fourth Estate's exercise. Where I think that we're playing smart with foolishness is where your election agent is writing freedom of information requests and you're pretending you don't know about it. That's where I think we've been a little disingenuous. But then again, this is a full and transparent democracy, and I can make no complaint to the substance of the inquiry.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us at today's media conference. Remember, wear your mask, wash your hands, and watch your distance. Take care.